Night falls softly over the Giza Plateau. The last light of the sun bleeds into the horizon, fading into a delicate amber that clings to the edges of the dunes. The air is still, but not silent. The desert never truly sleeps. It exhales, it whispers, it remembers. Beneath those golden waves of sand, beneath centuries of wind and silence, something breathes. Something sealed before time chose its first name. The traveler arrives at twilight, his footsteps barely leaving a mark. The sky stretches infinite above him, vast and unbroken, its first stars trembling awake. He carries no map, only an old parchment fragment and the kind of faith that burns quietly in those who search for what should not be found. Around him, the ruins are spectral silhouettes. The Sphinx, the pyramids, the scattered bones of temples swallowed by dust. To most, these are monuments. To him, they are doors. He kneels beside a fallen slab, its surface carved with half-erased hieroglyphs. The symbols shimmer faintly in the last light. Not gold, not paint, but something subtler, like memory rising through stone. One symbol stands apart, a circle inside another, lines spiraling inward like breath turned to image. He traces it slowly, and the sand shifts around him, sighing like an ancient lung. Some say that beneath Giza lies a hidden vault, not a tomb, but a cradle. The priests of the first time, the Zep-Tepi, believed that the gods descended to shape order from chaos, carving their laws into the living earth. They called it the Chamber of Origin, the place where the first word of creation was written, not on papyrus but in light itself. Scholars dismissed it as myth, a metaphor for divine wisdom. Yet, in the secret texts of the temple at Abydos, there are lines that speak of a breath beneath the sand that hums when the stars align. The traveler listens. He hears the wind moving over stone, the faint hum that could be earth or something older. He begins his descent near the paw of the great Sphinx, following fissures no wider than the memory of a scar. There, beneath layers of limestone, the air cools. It carries the scent of age, dry, metallic, sacred. His lantern trembles, its flame bending toward some unseen current, as if drawn by the heartbeat of the ground itself. The tunnel slopes downward, walls carved smooth as glass. No tool marks, no debris, no sense of human hand. Only the occasional symbol, spirals, eyes, and wings, softly etched, barely visible under centuries of dust. As he moves deeper, the world above dissolves. The stars are gone. The dunes are gone. Even the echo of his steps feels swallowed. What remains is breath, his own, and the one the earth gives back. Then silence. A vast stillness that presses against the skin. He senses it before he sees it, the chamber. Its entrance is invisible, a seamless plane of stone. Yet the air trembles faintly near it, vibrating like a held note. The traveler places his palm upon it. The surface is warm. Beneath it, something moves, not physically, but in resonance, like the deep hum of a string plucked by invisible fingers. Legend spoke of a vault built not for burial, but remembrance. A place where knowledge was woven into vibration, into light, into the pulse of the planet. The priests who knew of it called it the Silent Library. It was said to contain no scrolls, no relics, no treasure, only the frequency of creation itself. A sound so pure that it could awaken memory in stone. Those who sought it were warned. To open the chamber is to disturb the dream of the earth. He stands there, hand trembling on the unseen gate. Around him, dust rises in small spirals. The hum deepens. For an instant, he feels weightless, as if the chamber itself is aware of him, breathing in the rhythm of his pulse. A faint glow seeps through the cracks of the stone. Not flame, not reflection, but the quiet shimmer of something alive. His lantern flickers out, and yet there is light. Pale, like moonlight seen through water. It ripples, soft and rhythmic, as if the walls themselves are inhaling. He closes his eyes, and the silence speaks. Not in words, but in memory. Images form, a procession of priests in white linen, carrying bowls of oil and flame. The sound of a single note sustained for hours, vibrating through sand and bone. The glimpse of a being with a human face and eyes like burning quartz, whispering a name the traveler cannot remember upon waking. As they documented the inscriptions, the temperature dropped. The torches dimmed, and a subtle vibration passed through the floor, rhythmic, deliberate, like a distant heartbeat. The sand trembled, but nothing fell. The sound came not from the air, but from below. Later, when the team reviewed their audio recordings, they found a frequency inaudible to the human ear. A pulse of exactly 20 beats per minute, repeating like a chant. When amplified, it revealed a tone that rose and fell, eerily like the cadence of breath. Dr. Nefra wrote in her field notes that night, "I believe this tomb was not meant to preserve death, but to contain awakening." The next morning, a sandstorm swept across the valley. By nightfall, the entrance was buried. Attempts to relocate the site in later years failed. No coordinates matched, no landmarks aligned. The desert, it seemed, had reclaimed what was not meant to be found. Today, legends whisper of the nameless pharaoh, the guardian who chose silence over eternity. They say his gate remains sealed beneath the shifting sands, not as a prison, but as a promise, that when the world forgets how to listen, he will rise not in flesh, but in light. And in the quiet hours before sleep, when the breath slows and the mind drifts, one may still feel it, the faint hum beneath the skin of the earth. Some names are not erased. They are hidden, waiting to be spoken again by the stars. Deep beneath Saqqara's sands lies a chamber that seems to move when the world is still. It was first found by accident, a hollow resonance beneath the feet of a worker, a soft tremor that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the ground. When they dug, they uncovered stone blocks fitted so tightly together that not even light could pass between them. Yet, from within came a sound, faint, rhythmic, eternal. The team called it the breathing vault. No one could explain it. There were no openings, no air shafts, no signs of life or decay. Instruments placed against the walls detected a slow oscillation, the rise and fall of pressure, repeating every few seconds. Scientists called it an acoustic illusion, but the desert, it seemed, was exhaling. When he opens his eyes again, the glow has faded. The stone before him is cold, immovable. The hum is gone. Only the slow rhythm of his own breath remains, fragile, small, human. He kneels, tracing once more the spiral carved in the dust. The circle within the circle. The breath within the breath. The story begins with Dr. Samir El-Badri, an acoustic archaeologist who had spent years studying the sound patterns of Egypt's ancient sites. He arrived at Saqqara under a burning sun, his equipment gleaming against the sand. As night fell, he descended into the chamber with a single lamp and his recorder. The air grew cool, almost damp, though the desert above remained dry as bone. He pressed his ear to the wall and heard it. A whisper, steady and deep, like wind caught in sleep. He began recording. The playback revealed something astonishing, not mere vibration, but rhythm. Pattern repeating with mathematical precision, like breath. Inhale, pause, exhale. He slowed the audio further, and within the sound appeared subtler tones, almost musical. Each oscillation carried harmonic notes, as if the stone itself was singing softly in its sleep. Dr. Samir remembered an ancient passage from the texts of the pyramids. The earth breathes as the gods breathed into clay. Life does not begin. It continues beneath. Perhaps, he thought, this was not a metaphor. Perhaps the builders of Egypt had known of this place, had felt the pulse and built their tombs above it as offerings to the living earth. The vibrations might have been natural, or they might have been something more, the slow respiration of the world remembering its creation. He set his instruments to map the frequencies. They traced perfect geometry, spirals, arcs, and circles, all converging toward a single unseen point beneath the chamber. It was as if the stone's breath came from below, from a core that pulsed in harmony with the stars above. The longer he listened, the more he felt it, not only in his ears but within his body. His heartbeat began to synchronize with the rhythm. His breathing slowed, his thoughts softened. He wrote later in his notebook, "The chamber is not speaking, it is listening, and when I listen, it remembers me." When dawn arrived, he climbed out of the shaft, his hands coated with dust that shimmered faintly in the morning light. He looked back once and saw the sand beginning to drift again, filling the pit, sealing the breath beneath stone. Today, no one can locate the site. Coordinates fail, records blur, memories dissolve. But travelers to Saqqara still claim that, if you stand alone at night, when the stars are mirrored in the sand, the ground seems to move, not quake, not shift, but breathe. Perhaps the chamber is real. Perhaps it was never meant to be opened. Or perhaps, like so much of Egypt, it exists somewhere between worlds, part memory, part myth, eternally exhaling through the sands that guard it. The traveler looks upward, toward the ceiling that might be miles of earth and silence above him. He thinks of the stars beyond that, the same constellations that watched over the first builders, the same ones that will one day shine over his forgotten footsteps. And in that slow rhythm, in that pulse too vast to measure, lies a reminder whispered across eternity. Life never ends. It only hides beneath the stone, waiting for those who know how to listen. On the western edge of Giza's plateau, where the desert meets the endless horizon, explorers once discovered an altar unlike any other. It stood alone, hewn from quartz so polished it seemed to drink the stars. Even under the full moon, it glowed with a quiet radiance, as though light itself lingered there, unwilling to leave. No inscriptions adorned it, no offerings lay upon its surface. Only a single circle had been carved at its center, faint and smooth, as if made by something that never touched the earth. This is where our story begins. As dawn approached, the sky deepened from violet to gold, and a researcher named Layla knelt beside the altar, her notebook trembling in the morning wind. She had come not seeking treasure or tomb, but light, the way the ancients once sought divinity. Legends whispered that this altar was not meant for worship, but reflection. A mirror between heaven and man, where prayers were received as beams, not words. Layla waited until the sun's first ray broke the horizon. As it touched the altar, a shimmer rippled across its surface, a radiance that did not reflect downward, but upward, vanishing into the sky. She blinked, unsure if her eyes deceived her. The light did not behave like sunlight. It bent against gravity, rising gently like a breath reversed. For a moment, it seemed as though the sky itself inhaled. Ancient astronomers once spoke of a mirror of ascension, built for the gods to travel through light. They believed that matter and soul were bound by brightness, that every beam contained both memory and direction. The quartz altar, Layla realized, might have been more than a monument. It was a threshold, a place where light crossed over and did not return. She placed her hand upon it. The surface was cool, pulsing faintly beneath her palm, like the echo of a heartbeat long stilled. In its reflection, she saw not her face but the faint outline of constellations, Orion, Sirius, and a lesser-known cluster once called the Steps of Ra. They seemed to move slowly, aligning into a spiral. Her breath caught as she recognized the pattern, the same one carved into the ceilings of Dendra's temple, known as the Path of Rebirth. The desert fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Layla watched as the spiral of light lifted from the altar. Not bright, not blinding, but soft, translucent, like the memory of dawn itself. It hovered for a moment above the quartz and then vanished into the air, leaving only stillness and the faint scent of ozone, like rain waiting to fall. In her notes, she later wrote, "As he ascends, the desert greets him once more. The night wind carries the scent of cooling stone and distance. Behind him, the dunes shift as if nothing has been disturbed. The Sphinx gazes into eternity, her lips curved in that same inscrutable stillness, as though she knows exactly what lies below and why it must remain unseen." It was not sunlight, it was remembrance, a reflection returning home. Some say the altar still stands, though few can find it. The dunes shift, the coordinates fade, yet those who search claim that on certain nights, when the stars align above Giza, the horizon glows with a strange upward light, a beam that rises gently, as if the earth itself is praying back to the heavens. Perhaps that is what the ancients intended all along, not to summon the divine, but to remind it that we, too, can shine without touching the ground. And as sleep approaches, this image remains. A silent altar, breathing starlight into the dark, whispering. Not all light descends. Some light remembers where it came from. At the edge of the ancient world, where sand met sea and the sky curved like a perfect mirror, the priests of Heliopolis built an observatory of stone and silence. Not for stars, not for maps, but for reflection, for the watching of what watches back. They called it the House of the Sun, a place where the horizon was believed to look inward, seeing itself in the eyes of those who stood before it. The story begins with the fading of twilight. A single figure climbs the worn steps of the observatory, an old astronomer, the last of his line. His eyes have grown dim, but he still walks with reverence, guided by memory rather than sight. Around him, the world dissolves into gold, then violet, then the pale shimmer that exists only between day and night. He sets down a bronze disc engraved with circles, ancient calculations of solar motion. But he does not consult it. Instead, he stands still and listens. For the ancients of Heliopolis believed that the horizon was not merely a line, but a threshold, a living boundary between two reflections, the sun above and its twin beneath the earth. Every dawn, one rose as the other fell, each feeding the light of the other in an endless exchange of remembrance. As he watches, the last arc of the sun sinks beneath the dunes. The horizon glows, not from the sky, but from within itself, a soft halo rising upward, as though the earth were answering its own farewell. He closes his eyes and recites an invocation once whispered by the temple's first priests. May the watcher be watched. May the eye within the eye awaken. In the hush before dawn, the traveler pauses. He feels the faint vibration beneath his feet, softer than a heartbeat, older than language. The earth exhales. The sand settles. Somewhere beneath, the chamber dreams on, breathing in time with the stars, whispering a truth that only silence can hear. The air hums faintly. The stillness deepens. In that silence, he feels something turn, not in the sky, but in perception itself. For a moment, the horizon bends inward. The light folds upon itself like a mirror remembering its image. In the reflection, he sees no landscape, no stars, no self, only an endless golden pulse, the breath of light becoming aware of its own being. The old astronomer smiles. He understands what the builders of Heliopolis had known, that every sunrise is not the birth of light, but the return of awareness, the universe remembering that it exists. The horizon does not separate the world. It joins it. It is the moment when everything becomes both the seer and the seen. When dawn finally comes, the sun rises from within that mirrored glow, slow and deliberate, as though born from its own reflection. The astronomer bows his head, feeling the warmth touch his closed eyelids. The temple's stones shimmer faintly, and then the world exhales. Long after he is gone, the observatory will crumble, and the sand will cover its stairways. Yet, the horizon will remain eternal, self-gazing, infinite. And when the desert grows still enough, travelers say they can see it shimmer twice, once in the sky and once beneath their own breath. And as the night settles over the listener, the story fades to quiet. For even the light must pause sometimes to look back at what it has illuminated. There is a stretch of Nubian desert where the wind moves like a slow hymn and the dunes glow with a copper breath. In that ocean of sand stands a ruin that will not yield to oblivion. By day it seems ordinary. Fractured lintels, a scatter of pillars, a broken doorway facing the sun. But when night comes, a faint radiance rises from the stone. Not bright, not boastful, only a tender glow, like memory waking inside a body that has learned how to sleep. The villagers call it the sleeper. Traders skirt it at dusk. Scholars mark it as debris from an unnamed shrine, perhaps Kushite in proportion, perhaps older than any cartouche. Yet the nomads say that when the moon is round, the stones hum, a low, slow tone that threads the ribs like a string plucked by an unseen hand. Our story begins when Idris arrives beneath that moon. He has walked for 2 days with a waterskin, a small lamp, and the old habit of listening. He enters through the broken gate and finds a chamber, roofless, where the stars pour down in a white hush. The walls hold no clear hieroglyphs, only impressions, as if images once pressed there had withdrawn, leaving a warmth shaped like wings, like spirals, like eyes half-closed in prayer. At the center stands a single column, smooth as poured milk, unchipped, uncracked, quietly defiant. Idris lays his palm upon it. The stone is warm. A vibration moves through him. Not sound, not touch, something between breath and thunder, a soft engine of time. He closes his eyes and the chamber opens. Incense rises, sand is swept in slow circular patterns. A procession of barefoot priests walks in a spiral, their heads bowed, their hands carrying bowls of liquid fire. And as sleep folds around the listener, one final thought lingers in the air, gentle, weightless, unresolved. A voice without words lifts from the floor. It is not a chant. It is the shape that a chant leaves behind. Idris remembers then that the ancients called such places parank, houses of life, where learning was carried by mouth and breath as much as by reed and ink. The column becomes a spine, the temple a ribcage, the desert a lung that fills and empties with the sky. He understands. This ruin refuses to die because it has learned to breathe with the night. He walks the perimeter. Each stone answers his steps with its own soft echo, matched and measured, like a heartbeat returning from a far shore. Near the eastern wall he finds a shallow niche, and within it a shard of faience glazed a deep river blue. It bears no figure, only a circle inside a circle, the sign used in older rites to name the breath within the breath. He thinks of the Nile's annual rise, of temples angled to catch the solstice, of songs cut into wall and air so that the building would keep the note when the singers went to dust. A wind gathers. Sand drifts across the floor in slow spirals, tracing the forgotten labyrinths of the liturgy. Idris kneels and listens. The hum settles into three tones, low, lower, lowest, a chord as old as dawn. He feels tears come for no reason he can speak. The stones are not mourning. They are remembering. They do not cry for what was lost. They exhale what was kept. Toward midnight, a thin band of cloud veils the moon. The glow fades, and with it the visions. Idris rises and presses his forehead to the column in parting. In the coolness he hears a final whisper. Not instructions, not blessing, only the quiet permission of a door that knows it is also a gate. He leaves the shard where he found it. Some fragments are not for pockets. They are for pulse. Outside, the desert is a soft black sea. The ruin sits behind him like a lamp turned low. He walks until the glow is a memory and the memory is a breath, and the breath is a silence he will keep. In the morning, no map will show him the way back. The sleeper does not suffer coordinates. It receives listeners. Those who arrive are chosen by weather and patience. What endures here is not the wall, not the stone, not the measured span of columns. What endures is the rhythm the place remembers. The way a body slows near sacred ground, the way a voice falls into the register of dawn, the way even the wind steps softly across the threshold. The temple does not ask to be rebuilt. It asks to be heard. And in answering, Idris becomes less a visitor and more a note returned to the chord. As you fall toward sleep, you may feel it, an even, steady humming just beneath your ribs. That is where the ruins go when they refuse to die, into the place in you where old music rests. Let the breath lengthen. Let the sands settle. Leave the door ajar for memory. Some sanctuaries do not end. They become the quiet your heart keeps when the world has finished speaking. High on a white plateau beyond the western desert, the wind is so thin it sounds like glass when it passes the ear. Travelers say meteors never cross this sky. It is a roof of stillness, a bowl of pale fire holding its breath. The Bedouin call the place the waiting. Old star counters would ascend with bronze discs and oil lamps, but leave with only the silence they carried up. Laith climbs there now with a small telescope, a notebook soft with thumbprints, and the kind of wonder that does not need answers. Night spreads like ink drawn with a sable brush. Constellations rise in their known places, Orion over the shoulder of the dunes, Sirius a needle in the throat of winter, the faint river of the Milky Way traveling like a pale caravan. But the hours do not move. The stars hang without drift, as if the sky were a fresco, not a living sea. Leith waits. He remembers that Egyptian sky priests once aligned their walls to the invisible motion of decans, star clocks that ticked with the night. He whispers their names like prayer beads. Nothing falls. Nothing flees. Some secrets do not wish to be found. They wish to be remembered. Then a soft alteration. Not in the heavens, but in him. His breath lengthens. His listening turns from ear to bone. The still firmament loosens, like a knot untied without hands. Shapes gather at the edge of vision. A faint arch, a halo, a cluster not marked on modern charts. It is as if the sky were remembering its younger face. Light appears as if from beneath the dark, not piercing, not sharp, but rounded like a fruit just formed. Rose, copper, violet. The not-quite stars pulse. He reaches a slow hand and one drifts toward his palm, leaving a thread of golden dust that vanishes as it falls. There is warmth. There is a pulse. It matches his own, then leads it like an older heart teaching a younger how to keep time. A line rises in him, learned long ago. What has shone shall not die. He understands that he is not seeing stars at all, but their memory. The waiting holds them the way a lung holds air, the way stone holds song. A residual, a remainder, the breath after the breath. Perhaps these are the constellations that guided boats before charts. The sky that roofed the first hymns to Aten. The elder arch of heaven that once sat lower, nearer, more intimate with the skin of the earth. He sets the telescope aside. Glass is too narrow for this. He lies on the cold chalk and lets the not-quite stars circle him. They make a slow spiral like a staircase of light without steps. He feels the plateau breathe, not quake, not shift, but breathe, and the great bowl of the sky inhale in answer. Above and below, the same gesture. Horizon to horizon, a single chest. There is no voice, yet meaning arrives. You cannot catch what remembers you. You can only join it. Leith closes his eyes. The spiral tightens, then opens like a tide, like sleep loosening the hand of waking. When he looks again, the lights have drifted higher, thinner, more transparent, until they are only the suggestion of a constellation where none is drawn. A smear of violet, a taste of copper, a memory of gold. Dawn takes its first pale sip of the east. The ordinary stars resume their steady procession. A hawk lifts from the edge of the cliff and writes a brief dark stroke across the morning. Leith writes in his notebook with a hand that feels borrowed. Perhaps fallen stars do not fall. They return to where memory sleeps, and we call that place silence. He descends in daylight. The plateau shrinks behind him into a bleached line, like bone. The wind renews its glassy whisper. In his chest, the older pulse lingers, teaching his breath a gentler gait. That is the waiting's last gift. Not a vision to hoard, but a rhythm to keep. It will return when night does. It will return when you close your eyes. If tonight you wake and the room seems lighter than dark should be, do not fear. It is the sky rehearsing inside you. It is the constellation that carries your name when you have laid it down. No meteor will tear this silence. No forgetting will waste this light. What has shone still shines, only slower, only softer, only nearer than the word star can reach. Let the day loosen its grip. Let the breath lengthen. Let the ceiling of your room widen to the old arch of heaven. The night knows how to hold you. The light knows how to rise without falling. Sleep, and remember what remembers you. And so the sands fall silent again. The stories fade into the hush of wind and memory. The chambers sealed, the mirrors dimmed, the rivers still. Egypt sleeps beneath its own breath, dreaming not of glory, but of return. There is a moment before dawn when the Nile turns to glass, still, silver, and endless. In that sacred hour, it mirrors the heavens so perfectly that one could believe the sky has descended to rest upon the water. The ancients called it the river of stars, believing each ripple carried the reflection of a soul once departed. The river was not merely a flow of water. It was time itself, moving softly between the world of the living and the realm of the divine. For every grain of sand is a fragment of time. Each one has seen empires rise and dissolve, has felt the warmth of dawn and the chill of forgotten nights. The pyramids do not speak, yet they remember. The temples do not move, yet they breathe. And somewhere, deep beneath that endless veil of gold, the buried vault still hums. Steady, patient, eternal. It is said that when the night is quiet enough, one can hear it, the low rhythm of the earth exhaling, the pulse of stone keeping time with the stars. Perhaps it is the breath of the gods, or perhaps it is simply our own reflection, the echo of humanity listening back to itself. The traveler returns at last, his footprints erased by wind. He carries nothing but silence, and yet he is changed. For those who walk among ruins never leave empty. They carry the weight of questions that were never meant to be answered. Questions written not in words, but in the spaces between them. As the moon drifts over Giza, a faint shimmer crosses the dunes. Not light, not shadow, but memory. It moves like thought, like prayer, like a dream slowly inhaling itself back into stillness. Perhaps this is how history survives. Not in the stories we tell, but in the silences that hold them. And as the listener drifts into sleep, the desert breathes once more, soft, infinite, awake. Some dreams are not meant to end. They are meant to rest beneath the sand, until we remember to dream them again. Our story begins with the soft sound of oars, slicing through that liquid silence. A lone boat drifts under the dim breath of the constellations. Its traveler, a priest of the old temples, journeys toward a hidden sanctuary said to rise only when Sirius, the star of Isis, crowns the horizon. He carries with him a papyrus sealed in wax, inscribed with a forgotten hymn to the sky. The ink is faded, but the words still hum, faint as wings in sleep. The priest rose slowly, each movement an echo of the ancient rhythm that once governed Egypt's life. The Nile was their pulse, their measure of eternity. Every inundation brought renewal, the silt, the crops, the promise of another year. But beneath the surface, they believed something deeper moved, a current of memory, linking heaven and earth, past and present, gods and men. As the boat glides further, the mist thickens, and the stars seem to sink into the water. He remembers the teachings of the temple at Dendra, that the river was a reflection of the Milky Way, a sacred twin to the galaxy above. Each bend of its course corresponded to a path in the night sky. Each temple mirrored a constellation. The Egyptians did not merely look upward to find the divine. They built it beneath their feet. He whispers the hymn softly. The words tremble in the air like small flames. O celestial mother, whose tears form the river, whose breath moves the stars, return your reflection to the world. The water responds in gentle ripples, as if stirred by something listening. The oars rest. The priest feels the current shift, slow, circular, deliberate. It is as though the river itself has awakened. For centuries, travelers and mystics have spoken of a place along the Nile where the stars gather within the water. A stretch of current so still it reflects constellations unseen by any telescope. Some say it lies near Philae, others whisper it drifts near Abydos. None agree because the place is not fixed. It appears only to those who travel with silence in their hearts. As the priest's boat floats deeper into the veil of mist, he sees faint lights beneath the surface, points of radiance pulsing like distant suns. They shimmer, then fade, then shimmer again. He leans closer, realizing the pattern they form. Orion, the hunter, the constellation of Osiris. A voice within him, calm and ancient, seems to murmur. The sky remembers those who remember it. He closes his eyes, and for a moment, the river disappears. There is only the sound of breath and starlight. He feels as though he is drifting through the heavens themselves, suspended between reflection and reality. In that weightless silence, he understands what the old texts meant, that the Nile was never just water. It was a mirror of the soul's journey, flowing endlessly between birth and return. When dawn arrives, the stars dissolve, and the surface turns to gold. The temple appears ahead, carved from the riverbank, its pillars wet with morning light. He steps onto the shore, carrying the papyrus close to his heart. The hymn has ended, but the sound remains within him, soft, eternal, like a ripple that never stops. And as the sun climbs above the horizon, one last shimmer moves through the current, faint, fleeting, sacred. Perhaps it was never the river that remembered the stars. Perhaps it was the stars that remembered the river. In the dim light of a forgotten temple, far from the laughter of the living, there lies a mirror, black as a night with no moon. Its surface drinks the glow of torches, refusing reflection. No face appears upon it. Only shadow, only depth. It is said to have belonged to the high priest of Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, who once gazed into it to see not the future, but the past that refused to die. The story begins with the arrival of a scribe, centuries after the fall of the dynasties. Dust clouds rise with his every step. He has come to translate what others dared not read. The inscriptions that warned of the eye that remembers when the world forgets. In the center of the chamber, he finds the mirror resting upon an altar of basalt, surrounded by faint symbols of stars and serpents. The air around it hums softly, as though carrying a breath too ancient to belong to this age. He lights a small lamp, and the golden flame trembles. The mirror reflects nothing. Not the lamp, not his hands, not even light itself. Instead, it absorbs. The deeper he looks, the more the world fades. He begins to see images forming in the void, fleeting, transparent, like smoke rising through still water. Temples rising from the desert. A procession of priests chanting under the constellations. The great pyramid newly built, its limestone blinding under the sun. The scribe's heart trembles. This was not imagination. This was memory alive. He recalls a legend whispered by the priests of Hermopolis, that the gods crafted one mirror of the heavens and one of the earth. The mirror of the earth, made of obsidian, held the power to capture light, and with it, truth. It showed not what eyes could see, but what souls remembered. Some said it reflected not the viewer, but the one who watched from the other side. The scribe feels the air grow colder. His lamp flickers. A soft vibration runs through the stone beneath him, almost like breath. Then, a whisper, faint and distant, threads through the silence. It is not a voice, yet it speaks. The words are felt more than heard, resonating deep within his bones. Do not look to see, look to remember. He leans closer, drawn into the dark. The mirror's surface seems to ripple. For a moment, he glimpses his own reflection, but aged, worn, with eyes filled with stars. Around that image, shadows move, not men, not gods, but something in between. He understands then why the priests forbade its use. The mirror does not reveal truth. It asks for it, takes what you bring and gives back what you've hidden. When he pulls away, the chamber has changed. The torches are out. The mirror glows faintly, like black water holding moonlight. In its depths, he sees the faint outline of his own back. Leaving the room, though his body stands still, a shiver runs through him. Perhaps the mirror does not show what is, but what will remain after memory fades. As dawn touches the desert outside, the scribe seals the temple again, just as he found it. No one will know what he saw. The mirror remains, silent and waiting, drinking the dim light that filters through the cracks of time. And as sleep gathers around the listener, the echo of that whisper lingers, soft, eternal. Some reflections are not meant to be seen, only felt. In a locked chamber beneath the ruins of ancient Alexandria, a single fragment of parchment was found, fragile, crumbling, veined like old skin. Its ink shimmered strangely under moonlight, shifting as if alive. It was not a map of rivers or roads, but of memories, a geography of what no longer exists. Scholars who studied it claimed it depicted Egypt, yet its coastlines curved differently, its deserts stretched into places unnamed, and its mountains rose where none should be. The story begins with a historian who had spent his life chasing whispers. His hands, worn by dust and parchment, trembled as he unrolled the map upon his table. The ink was faded, the symbols obscure, circles, spirals, and lines that curved inward like a maze meant for thought, not travel. In the corner of the fragment, one word remained legible, written in a script older than any known dynasty: remembrance. He began to trace its paths by candlelight. With each line his finger followed, he felt something stir in the air, a warmth, a faint hum, as though the parchment itself was breathing. He noticed that the map changed subtly with the flicker of the flame. Rivers shifted, deserts rippled. Temples appeared and vanished between blinks. It was as if the map was alive, reacting not to sight but to intention. Legends had long spoken of a cartographer priest who once served at the Temple of Sais, where it was believed that knowledge older than Egypt was kept. Knowledge said to come from the time before the flood, before even language had shape. This priest, known only as the Keeper of Shadows, was said to have drawn a map not of the world, but of consciousness, tracing where memory and myth intertwined. His ink, mixed with ground lapis and a drop of human blood, was meant to bind spirit to symbol. The historians studied the markings more closely. The spirals seemed to align with the stars: Orion, Sirius, the dog star, yet mirrored backward, as though the heavens themselves were being read from the other side of time. Following their pattern, he discovered the map did not lead across the land, but beneath it. Every temple, every pyramid, every buried city connected through invisible lines that converged under Giza, forming what appeared to be a vast underground geometry, a sacred architecture unseen by history. As midnight deepened, his candle burned low. The shadows of the room lengthened and began to resemble the shapes upon the parchment. For a heartbeat, he felt as if he stood within the map itself, surrounded by dunes that breathed, and walls carved with constellations that pulsed like hearts. He could hear faint music, the echo of a language without sound. He understood then what the map truly was, not a guide for explorers, but an invitation. A way to walk inward, through layers of time and self. A map that led into the quiet corridors of the soul, where forgotten things still whisper. When dawn came, the parchment was gone. Only a trace of dust remained, glittering faintly in the first light. The historian sat in silence, his candle burned to ash. Perhaps the map had not vanished. Perhaps it had returned to where it belonged. Somewhere within the shifting breath of the desert, still drawing paths between memory and oblivion. And as the listener drifts toward sleep, the story lingers like ink upon the night. Some maps do not lead us forward. They lead us back to what the earth still remembers. In the Valley of the Kings, there is one tomb that bears no name. Its entrance lies deeper than any other, carved into stone so smooth it seems poured rather than chiseled. For centuries, it remained sealed, untouched by thieves or scholars, as though the earth itself guarded its dream. When it was finally found, it appeared different, too perfect, too quiet, as if it had been waiting for something other than discovery. The archaeologists who entered it spoke of a silence that felt alive. Their lamps, no matter how bright, seemed unable to fill the chamber. The walls shimmered faintly, covered not in hieroglyphs, but in soft patterns of color that shifted when the light moved, like dawn trapped beneath the ground. Some believed it was the lost tomb of a forgotten pharaoh. Others whispered it was not a tomb at all, but a temple built for the sun. Our story begins on the night of its first excavation. The desert was hushed, the air cool and heavy with dust. A young Egyptologist named Salim descended the narrow passageway with a single torch. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, fading into the hollow earth. When he reached the main chamber, the light flickered, and the walls seemed to breathe. There were no carvings, no gold, no sarcophagus. Only smooth surfaces that glowed faintly from within, as though the stone itself remembered sunlight. Salim ran his fingers across the wall and felt warmth. Not of touch, but of memory. Embedded in the surface were thousands of tiny crystals, arranged in invisible symmetry. When the torchlight hit them, the glow intensified, forming fleeting shapes. Wings, spirals, eyes. He realized that the tomb was built not to contain the dead, but to capture the dawn. Ancient texts had spoken of such places, sanctuaries where priests believed light could be preserved, not just seen. The Egyptians called light the breath of Ra, the divine exhale that gave life to all creation. To trap that breath was to hold eternity itself. And yet, no one had ever found proof until now. As Salim stood in the stillness, he noticed something strange. A shaft in the ceiling, perfectly aligned with the horizon. When he extinguished the torch, a faint line of moonlight descended through it, falling exactly onto the center of the floor. The light rippled, as though alive, and began to crawl across the chamber, revealing shapes invisible before. Outlines of a boat, a rising sun, a human figure ascending toward radiance. The imagery was clear. This was no resting place for flesh, but for light itself. He remembered a passage from the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Those who die in darkness shall awaken in the light they have gathered. Perhaps, he thought, this tomb was a vessel, a chrysalis for the soul of the sun. As the night deepened, the walls continued to glow, faintly pulsing with unseen energy. The hum of silence grew softer, warmer, until it felt like standing within a heartbeat made of light. When dawn finally broke, the first ray of sunlight entered the shaft. It touched the wall, and for one breathless moment, the entire tomb came alive. Every surface blazed, not with fire, but with memory. The walls sang with color. The air shimmered like gold dust. Salim stood motionless, tears gathering in his eyes. He was not witnessing an illusion. He was witnessing the sun remembering itself. When the light faded, the chamber fell silent again. Soft, complete, eternal. Salim climbed back to the surface, trembling. Behind him, the tomb seemed to sigh, a slow exhale of stone returning to sleep. And in that silence, one truth remained. Some places do not guard the dead. They guard the light that dreamed of being human. In the ruins of Abydos, where the sand flows like a slow river through broken columns, there once stood a priest whose name has nearly vanished from record. His title was the Keeper of Breath. His task was unlike that of any other. He did not chant, he did not burn incense, he did not recite the prayers of the dead. He listened. He believed that silence was the oldest language, the one spoken before the first word was carved in stone. Each night, as the moon drifted above the temple, the priest would enter the inner sanctum, a place forbidden to all but him. He carried no torch, he needed no light. There, in the center of the chamber, was a single pillar of alabaster, carved with no symbols, no marks, only smooth perfection. He would sit before it for hours, unmoving, until even the wind outside ceased to breathe. The people of Abydos thought him strange. They said he prayed to nothing, that he sought gods who had turned their faces away. But he knew otherwise. He knew that silence itself was divine, not the absence of sound, but the presence of what could not be spoken. He called it the voice beneath all voices. One evening, a young acolyte, curious and bold, followed him into the sanctum. From the shadows, she watched the priest kneel before the pillar. The air was so still it seemed frozen. Then a vibration, faint, like the hum of a distant harp. It rose from the floor, from the stone, from the air itself. The girl felt her heartbeat slow to match it. The priest whispered without speaking. His lips moved, yet no sound emerged. The hum deepened, filling the chamber like invisible water. The girl felt tears on her cheeks and did not know why. In that moment, she understood the sound was not meant for ears, but for the soul. It was the memory of creation, still resonating through the bones of the earth. Later, she asked him what he had heard. He smiled, his eyes gentle as dawn, and said, "When the gods first shaped the world, they did not speak. They listened, and in their listening, the stars began to move." Years passed, and the priest grew old. When he died, he was buried not with words, but with stillness. The temple itself was sealed. Yet, even now, travelers claim that on windless nights, if one stands among the ruins of Abydos and closes the eyes, the stones seem to breathe. A slow rhythm, soft and steady, like the echo of a long-forgotten prayer. Perhaps he still listens there. Perhaps the silence never left. And as the night folds around the listener, one thought drifts through the quiet like incense through air. Some truths do not need to be spoken. They only need to be heard. Long before the Library of Alexandria was built, before the scrolls, the marble halls, and the scholars who worshipped the written word, there was another library. It was smaller, older, and hidden deep beneath the sands near Memphis. It was said that its shelves were carved directly into the limestone earth, its corridors lined with clay jars that held not just words, but the breath of memory. The story begins with a sandstorm, a furious veil that stripped the horizon bare. When the winds calmed, the dunes had shifted, revealing a broken archway. Beneath it, darkness yawned, an opening untouched for more than 3,000 years. A team of archaeologists descended, their torches trembling against the silence. What they found were not rooms of grandeur, but corridors of simplicity, walls etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer when the light passed over them. At the far end, they discovered the first of the jars, sealed with wax and marked with a single sigil, an eye within a spiral. Inside was no papyrus, no ink, only a faint residue of dust and the scent of something ancient, incense, perhaps, or the echo of language itself. As they opened more jars, a strange pattern emerged. Each one released a faint vibration, a tone barely audible but undeniably there, like the hum of a forgotten word trying to return. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Rahim, noted that the jars were arranged in circular patterns, each corresponding to constellations from Egypt's earliest sky charts. He began to suspect that this was no library of writing, but of sound, a repository of spoken knowledge, preserved not on paper, but in vibration. He wrote in his notes, "Perhaps the ancients did not write to remember. They sang." As they explored deeper, the air grew heavier, pressing against the skin like water. One chamber contained a stone pedestal with faint carvings of mouths, stars, and waves, the trinity of voice, sky, and time. Dr. Rahim realized what it meant. This place was built to hold the language of creation itself, the tones that shaped the world before it was written down. That night, they camped outside the site. But when the dawn came, the desert had changed again. The wind had returned, and the opening was gone, buried, as if the earth had inhaled its own secret once more. Weeks later, when they returned to search, there was nothing. No archway, no jars, only endless sand, smooth as silence. Dr. Rahim's notes ended abruptly with one final line. "The desert does not erase. It remembers quietly." And so, the legend of the buried library remains, a place where the first words of the gods were kept, not to be read, but to be heard by those who listen beyond sound. Some say that on windless nights, when the dunes are still and the stars are clear, the air hums faintly over the sands of Memphis, a soft, rhythmic vibration, as though the library still whispers beneath the dust. Perhaps it was never lost. Perhaps it only sleeps, waiting for silence to return. And as the listener drifts into dreams, one thought lingers like a faint vibration in the dark. Some knowledge is too sacred for the eyes. It must be heard by the soul. There are temples in Egypt that hum, not with wind, nor with footsteps, but with something softer, a vibration that rises when the air is still. Engineers call it resonance. The ancients called it the breath of stone. In Luxor, beneath pillars that have watched 3,000 years pass like sighs, archaeologists once recorded a sound that no instrument could fully capture. It came from the granite itself, a low, steady tone, deep as the sea, ancient as dawn. Some dismissed it as wind trapped within cracks, others as a coincidence of shape and time. But there were those who believed the temples still sang the hymns of their makers. The story begins with one such believer, a woman named Amina, a sound archaeologist who spent years chasing echoes across ruins. Her instruments were simple, a recorder, a tuning fork, and her own stillness. One night, under a full moon, she entered the hypostyle hall of Karnak. The pillars rose like a forest turned to stone, their shadows crossing the floor like roots. When she whispered, her voice returned multiplied, layered, softened, as if the temple itself was answering. She struck her tuning fork and held it against the stone. The vibration spread, faint but alive, pulsing through her hand and up her arm. Then she heard it, a tone, deep and slow, emerging not from the air but from within the wall itself. It grew, surrounding her in invisible rhythm, as if every pillar breathed the same single note. Ancient inscriptions spoke of the harmonies of the two lands, songs sung to awaken the gods within matter. The Egyptians believed stone could listen. That sound was not an echo but a form of remembrance. Temples, therefore, were not just structures but instruments, each designed to resonate with the frequency of divinity. When the sun struck their walls or chants filled their chambers, they did not merely amplify the voice. They became the voice. Amina closed her eyes. The note deepened, joined by another, then another, like an unseen choir rising from beneath the earth. The sound was not melodic, but vast, circular, infinite. She realized she was hearing what time itself sounds like when it remembers. Hours passed unnoticed. When she finally stepped outside, the desert air was cool and bright with starlight. She looked back at the temple, its silence enormous, its presence alive. She knew that if she returned tomorrow, the tone would change. The temple song was never the same twice, for it depended on the breath of night, the angle of the moon, the stillness of the listener. Years later, her recordings would be analyzed by physicists who found no external source, no vibration measurable within human range. Yet, on playback, faint hums remained, perfectly patterned, perfectly rhythmic. When amplified, the tones formed shapes of spirals and wings, the very motifs carved upon the temple walls. Perhaps the ancients did not build their monuments to eternity, but with eternity, shaping stone to remember the sound of creation. And in that thought lies the quiet truth. Sound never dies. It only sleeps within the stone, waiting for a voice to wake it again. In a forgotten corner of the western desert, an excavation team uncovered a sarcophagus unlike any other. It was carved from black granite so pure that light slid off its surface like water. No hieroglyphs marked its lid. No royal cartouche declared its owner. Only a single line was etched upon its base, reversed, as if meant to be read from within. He who sleeps without a name shall guard the dawn. The story begins with the lowering of a torch into the burial chamber. The flame flickered, hesitant, reflecting in 1,000 fragments of obsidian embedded in the walls. The air was thick, metallic, untouched by breath for millennia. In the stillness, the explorers felt something pressing against them. Not the weight of air, but of presence. Dr. Nefra, the lead archaeologist, had studied every known dynasty, every bloodline of kings. Yet nothing in her records mentioned a pharaoh buried without name or emblem. In ancient Egypt, to erase a name was to erase existence itself. And yet here was a tomb grander than any ruler's, deliberate, proud, and silent. The sarcophagus was sealed with precision beyond comprehension. When they finally lifted the lid, the chamber filled with a sound, low, resonant, like stone exhaling. Inside was no mummy, no coffin, no relic. Only fine dust, arranged in an oval depression at the center, and a faint shimmer that moved when they exhaled. Some of the team believed the tomb had been looted in antiquity. Others felt it had never contained a body at all. Dr. Nefra leaned closer and noticed something extraordinary. Faint carvings along the interior of the sarcophagus, not visible from the outside. They were written backward, mirror script like instructions for the afterlife read from the world beyond. Among the lines, one symbol repeated, an eye closed in eternal rest.